What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Game Dev Unchained, the #1 podcast about game development and the lifestyle thereof. I am your host, Brandon Pham. So please welcome our special guest today, Pete Bottomley. He is the co-founder of White Paper Games that shipped The Occupation and Ether 1 and is currently working on their third game. One of the first questions I asked Pete today was about the dynamics of working in a small team, and thankfully he was able to give us a glimpse.
High octane experience, and we knew we wanted to make it about mental illness, and everything that we put into the games, we want to make something that, I don't want to say games aren't meaningful, but for us meaningful in terms of theme and emotion and impact. Just a story that we want to tell, and we knew we need to strip it right back to the kind of mental health aspects, which kind of the game was critically praised for. So that turned out to be a super positive thing and really, really interesting to explore. So that's the kind of gaming phases. But in terms of team development, there was just such stress within a small team. And by the time you get to release, everyone is just super, super high on the stress levels, and you need to get the thing together. But I think when you are working on a project like Ether 1, where you have put all of yourself into that creative project, I think everyone was just super proud of that game at the same time. I think we always disagree and have creative differences, and I think it's important for people to be that passionate about certain things in the game. If it was ever that it was a lack of interest or a lack of engagement, that would be a different thing. But I think when everyone on the team really cares about what they're doing, the best idea rises to the top. There's going to be frictions in terms of work hours, but I personally take the approach of, I kind of just try and think that, people are always doing what they can. People don't set out to kind of intentionally piss people off or try to, just skip by doing the bare minimum, because especially in game development, people can get those jobs. People can just go and work in AAA, for example, and just earn 3 times more than they would be doing. So they're clearly doing it for a purpose. And, if someone has a kid or they have to hold down a part-time job, you just kind of just keep those communication lines open and just get through it together and just always try to help each other out. And in hindsight, they're always easy things to say, and then when you're in the middle of it, it's not necessarily the easy conversations that are being had. But you just got to keep putting yourself into that game.
Yeah, man, that's admirable to have that patience, especially with friends. I think that's where it can really work for or against some situations, because like with friends, it's not like a typical business type of transaction, right? There's more elements that goes into the relationship, so there's a lot more forgivable aspects of that, especially if something is missed or you're just more understanding of the fact. As a business partner, you're just thinking, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point in that, we all work together for 14 hours a day. So we're friends by just being in the same room and just being collaborators. And that's really interesting. But we didn't come together from a group of friends, which I think is an important distinction, where I see a lot of small teams kind of, okay, we have this group of friends and we kind of want to make a game, but then there's 3 game designers and maybe 1 programmer, and maybe they don't have an audio person and they need to get in an external audio person, which aren't part of the group of friends. And there's kind of a weird kind of mix that you can find in teams, which becomes unbalanced, especially when you come into trying to build a team past the first game, and you've got to be super efficient and direct with the roles that are in your team, and not have there's kind of no room for the fluff of excess skills. Everyone needs to be doing lots of different things, and I think that just, it seems by the look, it wasn't intentional, that everyone everyone's skills on the team just complemented everything, and we seemed to cover all the bases with just a few people. So that turned out to be a really positive thing. And initially, it wasn't us five and then six with Dave as the programmer. It wasn't initially that. We did try out a couple of other people just for a few weeks at a time, getting a different 3D artist in or whatever it might be. But it never really took off. It was still just me and Ben at that point, just trying to figure out exactly what we were doing. We very quickly got to the team where we're at now and who are still at the studio. That just sticks out to me as an important thing, because I do see teams come together just because they're friends and then they try and fill the slots based around that. But we kind of got our skill set on the team and just designed each one around what our strengths were.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to forming the team, you guys kind of looked out that everybody that you guys liked had the different skill set to complement each other, because that's a rare combination. Because I've seen it myself. Like, a lot of times we reach out to people that we know more so than the most qualified for that position. And I think for the reason that you said, like, it didn't work out because there's a lot of you're not playing with your best strengths. So, when things fall apart, it falls apart fast, especially when the skill sets aren't there, right? Did you guys,
when you're trying to be a friend externally to the studio, that's tough because you're in the kind of intense work environment of developing a game, which is super fun, but also incredible hard amount of work and stressful. So if you're still trying to be friends external to that and you're trying to deal with the social dynamics of, okay, now we should be hanging out outside the game time, we never really had to deal with that. Everyone's like super close at the studio, but it's not like we necessarily spend a huge amount of time outside of the studio with each other, which I think is important. I think you need your own space to kind of declimatize and go back and tackle the game.
Right. I mean, it's so easy to talk about work in like your personal life as you're like dealing with these people, and like that's the worst thing you can do, because it's just adds the amount of stress that continues the next day. Did you guys always start with
so
having?
Bad for that.
Yeah, sorry. Did you guys always start out with having everybody physically next to each other, or do you guys try remote first to kind of before you got a studio up and running?
Yes, that's something I forgot to mention as well, is that when we kind of came together in 2011, we were kind of bedroom coding. We were all separate, and anyone that kind of has a rough understanding of the locations in the northwest of the UK, we currently have our studio in Manchester. It wasn't always the case. So the university that we were studying at was in Preston, and I myself are from Bolton, about 20 minutes away, which, it's a distance in the UK, but not so big in the US, because everything's so close together in the UK. But we got Preston, we've got Bolton, we've got Southport, where our audio guy NJ's from, Liverpool, where our environment artist is from, and Manchester, where James, the technical artist, was from, and then Leeds, where the programmer was, and then Ben was in Manchester at the time, but Lancaster. Anyway, long story short, we're all external, but only about 45 minutes away from each other. And we just looked out in the center of Manchester. James, our technical artist, his auntie and uncle are architects, and they had some studio space in Manchester which we could afford. For what we have, we were paying super cheap rent, and it only really was when we got the studio space that things started coming online. We were doing things remotely, and there was that friction. We had never worked together before. So firstly, we had never worked together before. Secondly, we did not know how to make a game. It's not like we came out of AAA industry just knowing about production, knowing about milestones, how to build these games. We're only making these small mods or art tests or whatever you do at university, those kind of things. I had done some work experience over the summers at university at Warner Brothers doing TT games like Lego Star Wars and Lego Rock Band, but I didn't have a grasp of a full production by any means. So remotely, there was definitely just communication issues left, right, and center. But after getting that studio space, we kind of found another gear, and that was a massive multiplier on our productivity, where you could kind of turn around and just say, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you tried this? And all of a sudden, when we're under one roof, just being able to see the screens and get that energy and activity is something that I would recommend if you can afford it. Unfortunately, fixed costs, rent, paying broadband costs, energy bills, all that kind of stuff can add to your production costs, especially if you don't have much. But I would say definitely something like a rented space where you can collaborate helps. Just energy, production, just everything by a massive multiplier.
Yeah, I mean, the advantage of being next to each other is always more fun, right? I mean, just us being creative people, we kind of feed off each other's energy. And even though you try to do remote, with technology being better, meeting with each other, we can make it as frequent as possible, and Discord or whatever, Slack, kind of help ease the transition. But nothing beats just sitting next to someone and being able to brainstorm an issue. But in retrospect, though, although you guys it feels like preferably in a studio type of setting, do you have any advice for people who aren't conveniently next to each other? Like, if you were to do it again, knowing what you know now, shipping 2 games together as a team, knowing the process, and being a veteran developer now, what would you say to remote teams that just have no other way to do it? Like, if you were to reapproach that situation, what would be your best advice?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I don't have a huge amount of experience with this. So take anything that I say right now as a caveat, as I've not been there and done that. I'm just hypothesizing about what it could be like. And the thing that comes to mind first and foremost is just having schedules and routines. And I think more than anything, just having consistency in your production is number one. You can't be wondering where people are, and sometimes at some point someone that you were trying to get some information out just isn't responding. It turns out they went to the store and they ended up turning on Netflix, and they've just gone for a few hours and then they come back. Like, those kind of situations definitely happen, and it creates unnecessary frustration. So having schedules and routines, I think, has been the number one thing for us. And that's not to say everyone needs the same schedule and the same routine. I'm a super early riser, and I love getting stuff done first thing in the morning, whereas some people they just prefer to get up later, and so we don't hold everyone to like the same work hours. People come in over the space of 3 hours in the morning, and that's fine, because we just have expectation of there's a Monday morning meeting at this time and it'll last this long, and we've kind of got these production techniques down where we set what work needs to be done. Everyone has to be held accountable for the work, but just getting that work done in the time that you said you get it done in, that's fine. If you need to take a day off for a vacation, or a family member wants you to do something on a day, and those things are important. You've got to make time outside of the studio to do those kind of things. I was definitely guilty of that through Ether One, where I just kind of shut everything else off and just be work. But we've kind of learned to develop these systems where at the studio, what we do is we follow a cycle called OKRs. So if anyone's interested in checking them out, OKRs are objective and key results, which is a system Google uses. So it's good for software development, and basically you set yourself an objective and you set yourself some key results. And I'll probably write more about this on our blog and stuff like that, because I think it's been a super efficient system for us. But basically, the higher level is that you set yourself an objective, you say specifically what the key results will be within a given time frame, and then we kind of go off and do our thing. We've got a design team, code team, and art team, and we give ourselves 6 weeks to achieve these goals. And then we have 1 week where we're doing kind of a recap in our meetings and stuff like that. So what we're doing there is we're creating a schedule and a format to say, okay, we need to do this within this much time to, deliver this milestone or achieve something with the studio and the company. But how you get that done and when you get it done is kind of on your own time. And, if you want to do 3 hours of work one day, that's fine. We just flag that and create systems. In terms of remote work, things like, just Slack probably comes up a million times in your conversations, but we use Slack and Google Hangouts, and that seems to be all we need. I think in terms of remote software, things like having a calendar channel and having that calendar synced with your Google Calendar, and whenever anyone is off, just put it in the Google Calendar, and then it pings in Slack and it pings it in the calendar channel. Just little tips like that. It just makes everyone aware of what someone else is doing. And I think for remote work, the biggest frustration would be having an expectation that you can ask someone a question, but them not being there to answer it, which creates a bottleneck. But also just trying to plan your work in advance. So you're not making things up as you go, and then you need to bug a 3D artist. Oh, by the way, we need this crate making instantly, like we need it now kind of thing. And just planning in advance what you want to achieve, setting those goals, and then, just letting people achieve it as long as they hit their milestones.
So I want to kind of go back to the content. So Esther 1 was your first game, and you are the main founder that got the team and the team of bandits together. Did you have a fully fleshed co-founder? Sorry, my bad. Sorry, guys. Did you guys have a fully fleshed idea of what the game was? Like how far along? Oh, no, not at all. You just had a faint idea to get together?
Yeah, so like I was saying, it transitioned a bunch, and I think it transitioned knowing what we were able to achieve. So you kind of ask the question, knowing what you know now, what would you go and change? And we started off with 2 people trying to make just some kind of mod, just get something together and ship it. And very quickly we grew a team of talented artists and designers that we thought, okay, we can do something really impactful here, and we kind of changed the scope of that. And bear in mind, we didn't have any kind of publishing support, we didn't have any marketing, we just had this thing that we knew we had to create, and there was no long-term vision for the studio. It wasn't that, okay, we'll do this game and then that'll lead on to this game, and in 5 years we'll have that. Now we have those kind of things. We know the long-term vision of the studio, and we know what we're trying to achieve. But that kind of stuff we weren't paying attention to. And to be fair, I don't think you need to. I think you just need to be, I don't want to say passionate about what you're creating, but you need to just really want to make something. You have something to share, and you have your art to share with someone that you think will find interesting and at least resonate with them. And I think that was our goal. I personally didn't have a plan post Ether 1 what we were doing. It was just make this game. It's kind of make or break, and so we had no larger vision there.
Well, I think that's a really interesting strategy, because you're pretty much giving it your all as if it's your last, because I feel like a lot of studios set themselves for failure by planning too far ahead, where their eyes are past the present, and then they lose focus as soon as a little bit of that gets wavered in their sightlines. So I definitely sign off on that strategy. Just putting everything that you got, having something to say, which is something that I definitely need to stress. Like both your studio's games, Esther 1 Occupation is very different. It has very strong themes. Is this always an intention behind your games going forward? Is it something that you feel like, hey, this is our strength, this is what we want to talk about, this is what we want to do, we want to make a statement out there?
Yeah, so it's exactly what you're saying. I think I again, this is a hindsight reflection, so I'm not saying I would have thought this at the time, but on our first game, I don't think you need to worry about the long-term strategy. I think if you're going for investment or publishing, maybe they want to know that. But if you can make that game on your own and just bootstrap it, I personally think that's a way better option, because when you release, you've not given up all the royalties to your game. You're generating income as soon as you start selling, and you can build your studio off that. And I think having long-term profit share of your game sales is the most important thing for a studio. Like, you need to own the stuff that you put out. So yeah, with that said, I don't think you need the long-term 5-year vision, because you don't really know who you are as a team. You don't really know what you enjoy, and you don't even know if people will resonate with what it is you want. You hope you can find your audience, but I think you should just design for what you feel needs to be made, and I think people will naturally gravitate towards that. So on the back end of Ether 1, we realized that we wanted, these strong narrative themes, hopefully between Ether 1 and The Occupation. Even though they are different games, you can see the evolution there. You can see the evolution of the storytelling. We had never made a 3D character before. Our technical artist had never made a 3D character. And so he was saying, okay, I kind of want to make characters now. And so The Occupation now has characters. I had made a kind of linear puzzle game, although the puzzles were optional. So, you weren't gated at a puzzle. You could still progress without solving the puzzle, almost in a Witness style environment. I kind of wanted to do something more systems driven. I'm super interested by Arcane Studios, who make the Dishonored games and who have the lineage in Thief and Looking Glass and all those kind of really super interesting emergent gameplay styles. That's kind of where I wanted to level up my skills as a game designer, because of course we had now Unreal Engine 4 with The Occupation, so designers had way more control over these systems that they could kind of prototype very quickly. And everyone kind of just brought to the table what it is that they were interested in. And like I said before, everyone has understanding of concept of game design, and everyone contributes to these themes and narrative arcs, and everyone's interested in the storytelling aspects and how we want to tell a story. And within probably about 18 weeks at this point into pre-production on the new game. And, again, it's that Ether 1 Occupation, and hopefully the differences between Ether 1 and The Occupation, you can see that in the new IP. So we're constantly moving forward, but we're not making U-turns, we're not changing genres, we're not suddenly making, an esports game or something that's just brand new for an audience that doesn't exist for us yet. So I think that's important. I think that designing for an audience for us works. That being said, you have studios like Double Fine, who I go on YouTube and I see these trailers coming out on the YouTube channel over this last week, and they've got a few different games coming out, some external developers, but they generally do just different things, and that's also interesting and works for them. So I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say is, just because we do it a certain way, I'm not trying to imply that, any small developers listening should go ahead and just make the same kind of game, but make them natural evolutions. It's just something that we find works for us.
Yeah, every team have a certain dynamic. Like, you guys are still figuring out, even though it's like the main core of 6 people, the team that made the first game, Esther 1, to you guys working on your, your third game, it's a different dynamic. Everyone's more mature. Everyone's growing together individually and as a partnership. And you guys are constantly working against your craft. So I want to bring back this question of like pre-production, right? So obviously you went through pre-production with Esther 1. You guys improved that process with The Occupation, and now you're improving that process again with their third game. So what was that? What was the pros and benefits? What was the biggest difference between those 3 processes of pre-production? Did it get more succinct? Did it get better? Did it get faster? You guys were able to kind of hit the ground running. What was that evolution looking like?
I should also point out that although Ether 1 shipped with 6 people, The Occupation shipped with 11. So we managed to grow our team from 6 people to 11 people. So I didn't want to imply that we shipped The Occupation with 6 people, because that definitely wasn't the case. And we had so much help, and it allowed us to hire more specialized roles on the occupations development. So we have another technical designer, we have an AI designer, we have another programmer, and it just helped us, another 3D artist, and it allowed us to just push that bar a lot more. And the occupation had its own development issues because it was a massive technical challenge and a massive technical undertaking, making these characters that locomote and can open doors with door handles, and we just pushed ourselves technically a lot on that game. And interestingly, when you say we've been through pre-production on the occupation, we've been through pre-production on the Ether 1, and then the occupation, we actually didn't have a pre-production on Ether 1. It was just, I guess we're making a game now, and we just started making the game. There was no pre-production, there's no planning. It was just like, there was no alpha, beta, or anything. It's just like, right, the game's done, ship it, kind of thing. So we didn't really have a concept of those markers at that point. The occupation was different, and it had its own difficulties in that before we even announced or spoke to a publisher of any kind, we kind of had a solid vertical slice of what we knew we wanted to achieve. The issue is that the game design wasn't tight yet. I had the high level overview of the game. I knew the main narrative beats, and also had an idea of the low-level gameplay, the tactile interaction, making everything super interactive, but we just didn't have that mid-level gameplay loop really nailed down. And I think, especially when you have more programmers on the team, more technical designers, just them not being aware of what those mid-level loops were caused a lot of production slowdown in the occupations development. So that's something we've learned from for the new game moving forward, and that we kind of had we call it a retrospective after we ship the occupation, because I just don't like the term post-mortem, because it implies something died and there was something bad happened that we need to try and salvage. So retrospective for us is like, okay, what did we learn? What can we take forward? And so we had all these lists of what design can do better, what art can do better, what code can do better. And so we actually just in a Google Slides or PowerPoint, whatever you want to do, we went through, okay, we just made a sheet called pre-production, a sheet called production, a sheet called pre-alpha, alpha, beta, gold. And we literally listed down what we want achieving at different points of production. So now we have a pre-production checklist, we have a production checklist. We know, in alpha, we want to lock localization so that if you're doing languages and subtitles, you need to have all these things locked for localization. Every 6 weeks now, we archive a game build and we gather text in Unreal Engine to make sure we're not localizing anything weird, because we must have spent another 15% on the localization budget by localizing debug text strings, for example. There's just useful production processes that you can identify, and we literally just have them in a PowerPoint that we can go through and check and review. And then we went as micro as having a level block map production checklist. So we know we need to kind of let design go in and do the block map, don't let art touch the block map at all in any way. And then we kind of do a loose pass on the gameplay. We throw the AI scripting in there. We then do a modular building pass, and then we do a super basic modular building pass, and then add the dynamic lights for the AI, so we know exactly where these scripted events are happening, so it allows that environment artist to know where to use dynamic lights, for example. So again, I'm getting super low level right now, but I guess I'm just trying to say that we kind of only upon shipping and reflecting were we allowed to create those production markers. And it's not something we even had after shipping our first game, because we were 6 people and we didn't have those technical challenges, because everyone was we had a designer, a narrative designer, an audio person, a tech artist, a 3D artist, and a programmer. And then all of a sudden you have these specialized roles as you develop, and that, I guess going back to the kind of long-term 5-year vision of the studio, you don't need to worry about this highly documented, well thought out systems process when you're so small, because you're just going to bog yourself down when you're not even sure what you're doing yet. But as you ship, your second game, those things become necessary and useful. And you're just making it up as you go along. We're 11 people, we're on our third game, but we still, have no idea how to be a productive video game development studio. And you're always figuring things out and tackling inefficiencies that you can make better and just ease those bottlenecks in production.
Mm-hmm. One of the earliest memory I have while in college learning about game design and the game design document is that my teacher says that this is a document that will change and be pretty much thrown out from front to end, right? And at that point I'm asking is like, why the fuck do we need to even write this? Because it's a massive document to get the pitch, obviously get investors interested, to know fully as a team, as a Bible to kind of look back on, to kind of track our original goal. But pretty much as you guys have mentioned, like it changes as we go, like it evolves, it gets better, and it gets less and less reference, in my opinion. So the hardest part, at least I want to ask, is that as we get a team together, is the beginning, right? Getting through the prototype, getting a prototype that kind of marries everyone's ideas and motivation together. How bogged down should a team feel with getting everything absolute in the Bible? Do you recommend just getting your hands dirty, roll up the sleeve, and just do it, as you guys did with Ether 1, and then kind of polishing that approach with the occupation? I mean, I guess I'm kind of asking, like, for the vertical slice of the prototyping phase, do you have a time boxing as a team that you guys feel is appropriate for each of these phases here?
Yeah, and so I think it mainly depends on what your goal is. If you're trying to get funding, if you're trying to communicate your game's vision, are you going for a grant? Are you going for the Unreal Dev grant or anything like that? Because all these kind of markers will be different and have different requirements. I certainly did a bit too much documentation on the occupation. On the Ether 1, we only really had level design documents, and they can be useful in production. I agree that the game design document isn't necessarily a thing that works anymore. I guess, again, I have no idea, but I guess if you're going into AAA development and you need to kind of prove, that you've planned out the production well enough,
right,
maybe needed. But let's just take the example of small teams development, anywhere between one developer and 15, should we call it. What our process is now is that people, at least in our types of games, people on the team want to know the kind of high concepts. Why is this game important? What is the overall vision for the game? What is the tone? What is the theme? Just give me a flavor of that, and we will do a 3 to 5 page document just on that game, just as a high level beats. I think that's a useful thing if you have a designer on your team just trying to communicate a high vision. And then in terms of other documentation, I've started using spreadsheets a lot more recently, and we have kind of a production document that links to an animation document, because the animator, it seems in our games, animation is going to be the definer of scope and budget, because animation is super precious. It can be time consuming. Again, hopefully we can get better development practices, with things like mocap and whatever. But right now we're hand keying everything. We tried a few mocap solutions. We're just using Maya and hand keying all our animations. So yeah, to not go off tangent too much, in terms of documentation, it is, like you said, the playable prototype. You just want, something 3 to 5 minutes of gameplay. In our games, because you've got to communicate high level, we've not got as tight feedback systems. So if you're in a super mechanically driven, bottom up game design where you can literally play the game for 3 minutes and get everything down in that 3 minutes you want, if you have a really quick and tight gameplay loop, it's like you shoot these things, you get the points, you upgrade, you do whatever the mechanically driven thing is. If you can prove that concept in 3 to 5 minutes, you're focusing on getting everything super tight and feeling really, really nice. Whereas in our kind of vertical slice, whatever you want to call it, we're looking at more like 30 minutes to 50. We're trying to get the overall tone and the pacing of the game. So we'll kind of block everything out. We have in-house audio, and I personally think that helps us massively. NJ was from the team from day one, and we always get tone and sound effects just laid in there, just as placeholder, because it helps everyone kind of see the vision of the game. And then in terms of documentation, we're literally in this phase right now. So I am doing, I do a level design document for the environment artist and the AI designer, so that they know the core beats of where the level should be. And that's literally just taking screenshots and annotating them in some kind of documented format. You know, it doesn't have to be built lighting or beautiful, and you just use blocky colors and just say like, oh, I see this event happening here and this event happening here. And of course, anything playable is going to be super useful. So level design document, AI design document. We have a character design document, which we actually stole from the template from a Pixar storyteller character design class, you know, where you have, you know, the traits and the behaviors and their motivations and, you know, what their history is and their background. And we try and just set the tone. And that's important for the character designer to know, the character artist to know, you know, who these characters are, how they all fit together, the kind of the range of heights, and you know how everyone will fit together, and the range of characters, all this kind of stuff. We don't have a GDD. We just have a production document which we do build reviews in, where we list, you know, tasks from playing that build and just have little checkboxes next to them. I think
is GDD still so is GDD still relevant to, I'm assuming you guys are still self-funding and or at least maybe looking to pitch to investors, but like, is GDD still a prevalent thing in those meetings where people are like, I need to see front to back what this game is about?
Yeah, so again, if we're talking purely small teams, it may be different, you know, if you're Warner Brothers or whoever.
Right.
But
Sure.
In the purpose of small teams, I don't think they are. For us, we are still in the kind of pre-production. We've not got any publishing or any investment, but that's what we're working on right now. We're looking to move those steps forward. So what we're planning is, one thing that I forgot to mention, instead of the kind of GDD, what we tend to do is we have obviously the playable. If you can have something playable, that's perfect.
That beats
but what we do on top of and what we do on top of that is we create a 10-minute show reel of the game, so highlighting the key gameplay moments that we've put in the game build. We talk over it, we narrate the playthrough, we explain what's going on, and instantly just a 10-minute video will explain a lot about your game. You know, if you bookend it as well, put a nice start of the game logo, put a splash screen at the end, almost make an extended trailer. And just for reference for anyone that cares, it's a similar thing to the IGN first The Occupation trailer that we did. We did 8 minutes of new gameplay, where we narrate the playthrough. So it's that kind of thing. Obviously that's super polished because the game was deep in production then, but we just do a super blocky version of that. So we take a 10-minute video, and then we also do a 3-minute video, which is more of the elevator pitch. And that is, you know, what is this game? Why is it important to make? What's the hook? What are the core themes? What are the key pillars that you're trying to hit? And that kind of just, you know, the classic elevator pitch. If you're only in an elevator and you had to pitch a game, what is it that you're showing? And we include things like who White Paper are, who the team is, why we believe we can make this game. So it is a little bit more pitch in a way. So, you know, you see that as the pitch document aspect, but it's more video based and dynamic. Now we still do a pitch document, which is about 12 slides long, and that is super high level concept stuff. again, theme, tone, game budget is important, what the game design pillars are, who the audience is, all those things that you'd expect to be in a pitch document. But we find that video evidence actually backs pitches up way better. So if you have the 10-minute extended gameplay video and then a 3-minute super concise thing, those two videos, along with a pitch document, along with a budget, some kind of spreadsheet created that shows how much the game is going to cost to make. Those are the main things. And then if you're getting more in depth with stuff like that, generally publishers want to know things like risk mitigation. So are you using any third-party softwares that could break the game? Are you shipping in any territories you've never shipped in before? Do you know are there any foreseeable hurdles that you might run into? But that's getting more on the pitch level. So to come back to your game design document, no, because we kind of break it into the separate elements, because I don't think you can know the game design document in pre-production, and you could only really create a game design document once you've hit alpha, when you've been created and you followed these avenues that you didn't know existed, but you thought there was an interesting creative idea there, so you just ran with it and it turned out to be a super cool idea. You can't necessarily plan for that stuff. You should always know the high level and be aware of where you are in production, but I think a game design document locks you down to something that you have no clue about yet, in my opinion.
Because I'm slowly discovering, while working with smaller teams, but also in my professional life, the momentum is everything, and nothing slows things down more than a wall of text that you expect people to read, and it's it's not exciting, especially if you're biting for people's time. With your own team, obviously, maybe at the beginning everyone's working part-time, usually after work or something. That limited amount of time becomes so sparse in attention span, where it's very hard to keep people together without them seeing something being run in the game, right? Like, I don't care how much documentation you have about this idea that you have, is it running in the game? And that's pretty much how I feel when there are like weekly team meetings or something, where there's nothing shown, right? I don't care how much of a book you've written out, but is it represented in gameplay, interactivity? And even more pressing is when you're dealing with publishers, like you said, it's like their time is super limited, like especially if they're a highly sought after publisher. They're looking at stuff all the time. Can you get them in 3 minutes to get them interested in the 5 minute, to get them interested in the 10 minute, And I think the way you're piecemealing is something that is very true in this time, where it used to be about the GDD, but I'm starting to, that's why I question it, because I'm starting to think about how important the GDD is nowadays, because I can't imagine any of these investors reading through those 100 pages of documentation without first being interested in the game at all, right? And even if they are interested, they'd much rather see the 10-minute overview of the game itself, the team, the accomplishments, and the ability that the team can deliver it or not. I mean, that's all they really care about. Can you do it or not? Have you shown me enough evidence? Like, even if I really have a hard time thinking these publishers actually flip through this GDD and like understand everything before they okay the project.
Yeah, I think it's part of two different things going on there. It's the documentation, in the way you're referring to it, is the two different aspects. You've got the team documentation. Does anyone on the team need anything, and does the publisher need anything? And although the publisher won't necessarily read word for word what's going on in your 100-page game design document, it's about how you're communicating your ideas. And if you do, sometimes they'll want something called a game technical document that kind of breaks down any technical aspects of the game, and that kind of gets me onto the kind of programmer aspect, in that with something like Ether One, where there's a designer, an artist, a programmer, a coder, you don't necessarily need the documentation, because like you're saying, everything is represented in that video game. In the editor, you can see it. You can see people committing work to perforce whatever you're doing there. Whereas when you become a larger team and more specialized, and you have to communicate your ideas to someone else that is implementing. So if you think, when you're early stage, you are the person working on the thing that you're thinking. So the documentation should only really be for your own personal use. It's to remind you, and therefore you don't need paragraphs of writing. However, if you're a bigger team and you're trying to communicate a vision, say you're a game designer, you just need a programmer for this specific thing. Programmers will generally want the documentation. They'll want to know specifically X, Y, and Z, every variable, what connects to what, and what is the larger vision, and what are you relating this to. And that's hard as a game designer working in kind of a high level game, which is what we work in. We kind of think about the world and the tone and create mechanics around what we think the themes of the game should be, whereas a bottom-up studio will think of the mechanics first and then just fit the story around whatever works with the mechanics. So that's the challenge for our team, because we're very visual and tone and high level based. So when a programmer is trying to implement a system and they want to know the specifics, you just need that documentation. And we've created a language now where they kind of leave the system loose enough for the designers and artists to go a little bit off the rails. It's like, oh, we found this cool idea, so we're going in this direction. So the programmers have got a little bit less, stressed out about us changing stuff mid-production. So documentation in that respect, is sometimes needed if you need to communicate your idea to someone. Like a 3D artist with an art Bible needs to show another artist how they would do metal, for example. I'm sure you run into that all the time. It's like, when you're doing this thing, you need to communicate how you've done that to someone else, just to keep tone, vision, whatever it is you're trying to communicate. But in terms of from a publishing aspect, they won't necessarily read through every word of documentation. That's why we like to do the videos. That being said, if you do have well documented evidence of your development, generally I think it's I think it's evidence as you go. If you're documenting, okay, we said we wanted to hit this milestone, we didn't hit this for X, Y, and Z, this is how we're going to change production. If you show how you're thinking about the higher level of the development of the game, that's going to show them that you have understanding about how the process works. Whereas if you've come to them and you just give them 17 long-winded documents and you've not actually put anything in engine, that might also signal a red flag to them. Just saying, okay, they're just kind of running in quicksand, they're kind of spinning their feet, and they're not actually getting in and doing the work, which is also super important.
You kind of touched on this a little bit before, but you were talking about how you guys started with a core team of 6 and slowly expanded the team based on needs and what you guys wanted to achieve with the game. How did you guys combat feature creep? Like, how did you guys get burnt with that, and how did you guys rectify that? One best case scenarios of how it worked out.
So the only answer there is that we started running out of money. Like,
that would help.
Really bad for feature creep, and and it's not so much feature creep in our case. It's not that we suddenly take a U-turn. It's the refinement of something that we know isn't quite right, and we want to do the best job in terms of narrative delivery or design. Like because stories just need to iterate. It's kind of like the GDD. If you try and write it all and it just goes in perfectly, it's never going to happen. And it's the same with anything you're doing narratively. It happens in filmmaking, and like reading the Pixar history books, and obviously Creativity Inc. is a massive one that people go to, but To Pixar and Beyond is also a really good book, and it shows that how these films get concepted and storyboarded, and they just end up being bad, and they just need a different direction. What they thought might work doesn't, and people don't resonate with a certain beat in the game or whatever. Narrative just has this thing that it needs iterating on, and because we base pacing and gameplay around our narrative beats, it means constant adjustment and iteration. So it's not that we just suddenly create this new feature, is that the gameplay mechanics have to speak about what the story is speaking about, which is a really hard challenge. Genuinely, it's a lack of time and money that caused us to stop. But how do you avoid it? I tend to see it as kind of tightening screws across a wall. Like if you imagine this 4x4, and you just tighten lots of different screws all over the place. You don't tighten one screw, almost like changing a car wheel. That's just come to mind. So you tighten one, and then you do the opposite, and then you do the opposite. And if you start tightening one and then just go in a linear sequence, you'll probably find that you're just finding things that you want to change and adjust. And if you've locked it down so tightly too soon, it doesn't give you that flexibility, and you will lose time having to either scrap it all and redo it, or just not touching it and not really being happy with the end result. Whereas if you just tighten things as you go across the whole game and just slowly digging down on the details and trying to picture it at high level, that generally helps in terms of feature creepy type things. Now, that also drives, like, I'm a technical designer, but it drives, the people doing the gameplay code crazy, because they want to know, the specifics from the get-go. So it's a balance, because rightly so, they want to create a well coded system, or architecture, should we say.
Yeah, what I found with creativity is that if you leave a room full of artists doing just artist things, like I feel like it's going to fail as a product, because in the end, we're making an entertainment product, right? We're trying to sell something. We don't want to just create art forever. And so I feel like that's where the restraints, the producer and everything is very necessary for that process, to kind of create things within a box. And then, yes, the money and budget and bank account telling you to stop feature creeping is actually a good thing, because now it's going to be shippable. And then making sacrifices where we have to make sacrifices, but not really what do you call it, like just demoralizing or lowering the quality of the overall game, right? And I mean, those are the cuts and the maturity I feel like a developer has to face to be able to ship a good product on time, in budget, and just be out there. And I think it's also necessary for the team too, to kind of have that reality check once in a while.
Yeah, and I think you see that in AAA development way better than small teams development. And again, I kind of referring back to Ether 1 to Occupation. We didn't take any of the code base across from Ether 1 to the Occupation, because we didn't know what we were doing. So we didn't architect the systems well enough, whereas we're online much faster with the new game. And the reason why I say that is that AAA development does that a lot better than small teams, and hopefully more small teams can keep building upon the foundations, because you see a lot of the time they just start from scratch again, which is tough, because you're still learning, and rightly so. You can do things better the next time. So by the time the game releases, the team has already got so much better at how they deliver things, but they just had to lock things down and ship it, which is an important thing. And the reason why I reference AAA is that you see that with things like the Dishonored games, where Dishonored 1 came out, and then they realized, okay, we know what this game is now, so they do the DLC, the Knife of Dunwall or the Brickmore Witches, and they speak quite openly about, okay, we knew what this game was now, and we can do a much more refined, higher quality version of this thing that we figured out how to do. And so hopefully small teams can get there as well, because it's a challenge for small teams.
I mean, we're as small teams, we always want to maximize the resources, being so small, but also up the quality every time, right? This question kind of pivots us to a new territory, because it's in the middle of controversy. At the same time, we're in the era where we feel like distribution of games is getting a lot easier. There's a lot of different avenues now where we can sell the game, but also it's becoming a very saturated market, especially with the console generation switch that's happening right now. I just want your own opinion about this subject. For developers out there who are hopeful, Steam doesn't seem like it's still a have-to place, but also, the Epic Store and all these other avenues that are allowing people to kind of get in, but at the same time, you're in the middle of a noisy market. Like, what is your opinion right now with how things are?
You mean in terms of the saturation of the market and what developers can do to get the game out there, or that the gates are so open that anyone can release a game? What is it specifically?
Both. The saturated market, and it's the same issue as always. How do we make noise when in a noisy area, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I personally don't have the answer to that. It is super tough for any team, whether you're one person, 11 people, 20 people, just getting your game heard is the hardest thing. And just being more aware of how to market your game. Again, going back to Seth Godin, if anyone's not read Seth Godin's stuff, he's classically known for The Purple Cow, but he's got a new book called This is Marketing. You've got the 21 Executable Laws of Marketing. There's just so many good, and Start With Why by Simon Sinek. All these things loop back to, if you create something that you're really, really proud of, that you believe has a very focused audience, and you're targeting someone very specific, you're not just trying to get a game to get it out there to generate revenue. You're making something you're proud of and you think someone will resonate with. I think you'll find the audience. The Games Press are pretty good at giving exposure to things that they find interesting. And it's just talking about the games, going to the shows, going to the conferences, getting people engaged, putting out high quality work, and you're not replicating someone else's work. You're doing your own thing and putting your own stamp on it. And it's not necessarily an answer, but I believe that is what will help you stand out. And I've never really been the developer that has thought, oh yeah, Steam's open to everyone now, there goes 100 games a week being released in the same time as The Occupation. We were at the stage of Ether One's release where Steam was going through the Greenlight program, so indie games weren't really being released. We had to pay $100 fee to apply for Greenlight, which we couldn't afford at the time. I remember that being the last bit of money we had. We put $100 into Steam Greenlight, and we were just like, right, we hope we get Greenlight. And I can't remember specifically. I think we're in like the third batch of Steam Greenlight games. That was a huge deal. It's like, our game can now be on Steam. And whatever issues people have with the distribution platforms, that they've given you an opportunity to be out in front of a massive audience, and it's not up to them to promote your game. It's disappointing as a developer. I wish I was on the front page of Steam when The Occupation came out, because it's in front of so many eyeballs. But you've just got to do the work, get the word of mouth generating. Yes, there's going to be algorithms involved, and there's some unfairness going on that people kind of, oh, if we buy 10,000 copies of our own game, we're going to inflate the algorithm to make it go to the top, and whatever crazy stories you hear. But yeah, I mean, those gates are open, and we're very fortunate about that. We have the same opportunity of someone. I mean, we don't have the same budgets, and we don't have the same marketing capacity as the AAA games, but we have the opportunity to put our game out in front of lots of people. And if you're talking to the platform holders like PlayStation, Xbox, harder to speak to people on the PC side like Steam, but the platform holders are out there, and they're at events, and they're going around checking out all the cool games. And same with Epic, the team are always at different events, so just grab people, show them your game, and just say specifically what you want. Like, what is it that you want from that platform to help promote your game? And I think that's the way forward.
Well, thank you, Pete, for your 1 hour wisdom. We are at that 1 hour mark, and this is the part of the podcast where I hand the mic over to you for you to shout out, promote anything that you want. I want to thank you for your time. And man, it was I I use usually as a very selfish hour for myself, because these are questions that I'm always curious about, and you guys are out there doing it. And I appreciate your time and everything. I know we had a little wrangling back and forth, but I'm so glad to talk to you. I was a fan. As soon as I saw the occupation, I had a lot of roots back in BioShock in my professional career. And dude, I saw like all types of inspiration, and like you guys took it to another level. So I want to thank you, and I wish you the best of luck. But enough of me. Here's the mic to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Brandon. And it's always tough trying to figure out time zones, West Coast to British Standard Time. And yeah, I appreciate you kind of spending your morning chatting to me. And I always find it useful kind of speaking out loud the things that I'm thinking internally, because it really helps kind of cement. So it's kind of selfish for you, but also selfish for me. And also just to be able to chat to you about the development of something that we're proud of, that we spent 4 years of our life working on. But in terms of personal promotion, just anything at White Paper Games, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We put everything into our games, and if you think the occupation looks interesting, we'd love you to just try it out, let us know your thoughts, send us a message. And yeah, I just really appreciate you giving me an hour of your time.
Well, thank you again, man, and we wish you the very best as always. I know listeners out there are loving this episode. So that's it. That's the end of the hour. This is Brandon Pham. I'll see you guys next week.
Cool. Thank you.